Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching and joining us today. My name is Matthew. I have the privilege of being part of the admin team here at Masters. If you call in at weird hours, whether that's late at night or maybe on a weekend, you might get the privilege of chatting with me or some of my other colleagues. I have the incredible privilege today to chat with and garner incredible experience from Kathryn Kazmerik, a registered social worker here at Masters Counselling. Great to have you back from maternity leave. How has it been being back from maternity leave? How has it been getting back into counseling? Maybe for those that are maybe not as familiar with you, maybe just provide a bit of background on yourself professionally and personally as you feel comfortable.
Wide open. Well, yes, I'm returning from mat leave. I was away for a year after giving birth to my second daughter. And so I had a blast. It was a much busier time than after my first. So I really enjoyed my maternity leave. And I'm just gradually reintroducing myself into work here at Masters. And so I'm really enjoying it. I feel like the days here are like a day out for me. And I think that's just because I really love the work that we do here. And I love getting to hang out with my clients, most of whom are kids and their parents, which means I get to do like fun stuff like playing with sand trays and art and talking about feelings, which I love. So yeah, I'm energized and I think my clients leave feeling generally better than when they came in. And so that's just a positive experience every time. So I've very much enjoyed being back. I'll be upping my hours in August, having a few more days available when my second gets into date.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. It's great to have you back. We definitely missed you. Today's topic we want to chat about and get your incredible opinion on is the topic of helping parents become safe spaces for their kids. I imagine this, I'm not a parent, but I imagine this is an incredibly important topic, especially when you're supporting families therapeutically. And so the first question I have, if we can just jump right into it, is what exactly is a safe place, or what does it mean to be a safe place for your child?
Well, to me, this is multifaceted. It means being safe for your child in physical space, emotional, intellectual, and relational. It means that they feel unconditionally loved, regardless of how they show up. And
Right.
so they are safe coming to you, obviously not feeling afraid like they could be physically hurt. They feel safe coming to you with all their feelings, that every feeling is welcome and that you can hold space for those. And I'll talk more about what that means probably as we go. That they are able to bring you their questions and curiosities, that they can form their own
Right.
opinions. And then relationally, that no matter what they do, that you will always maintain relationship with them, that nothing could threaten that relationship. I think that's what it means to feel safe with a parent.
Wow. Thanks for that. I mean, I have a kind of a natural follow-up question to that is, I mean, everything you just talked about, I think it's fair that that's almost required in all relationships. I know a lot of people who are in relationships, whether it's they're adults with their adult parents, or
Yeah.
maybe it's spouses, or even like a professional relationship where someone doesn't feel safe in a work environment. I guess maybe my first question is it sounds like a lot of those principles apply to most types of relationships, but is there anything specific about the relationship between, let's say, an adult parent and a child?
Yeah, I think it's beneficial for all relationships, but I wouldn't expect those same things out of like a relationship perhaps to like a coworker or a more distant friend or things like that. And even as I become an adult, I wouldn't always expect that out of my parents per se, because we start to kind of equalize in the relationship. And so we can maybe create more grace and space for not
Right.
always being able to provide that to each other. But I would say it is a need, it is a requirement in a parent-child relationship for healthy
Mm,
development. It is not just nice, which it is nice in a friendship or in a relationship,
right.
but it is like an actual like human need in parent-child relationship for thriving at least.
That's a great way to differentiate. You know, one is nice to have, but really for the health of the child, they need safe places. I guess my follow-up question to that is, so why, I mean, I think all people are well-meaning, they're well-intended, they want to be that safe place, they want to be a good parent, but I think we all know this example, we've all seen it. Maybe, again, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to my own personal experience, but I imagine there's a lot of people who are well-meaning, but they even struggle to create that emotional safety. Why is that?
Because we're human. Like, as I say, we have more grace for each other because we're not able to do it all the time. And so, by being a safe place for your child, I don't think the expectation is 100% of the time. because that's
Right.
not realistic. We are human. We have good and bad days. We have harder, stressful seasons. We just can't be on all the time. And so sometimes we are tired and we're going to react rather than respond in this intentional, supportive, safe way. And that's understandable. And that's not going to wreck your child if that happens from time to time. Ideally, we're able to do it some of the time. More often than not would be great. And we're giving them those experiences that they can build on. But people can't always do it because we are all human
Right.
and we bring our own experience of being parented into our parenting.
Right.
And so that brings up so much in terms of our experience with how our feelings were dealt with, the way our parents disciplined
Mm,
us. And all of that is stored unconsciously in our bodies and in our memory. And so that comes out generally unconsciously. And so when we are reacting, when we're tired, or when we are dealing with the fifth tantrum in an hour, we're not always going to be able to respond in maybe the way we want to. We might, respond in the way that we were parented or in the way that we have done over and over and over again throughout our life. And so sometimes it's just about, yeah, our energy and what we're kind of bringing through our.
yeah. Yeah. I almost hear you talking about there's almost like an aspect of, we're never going to get everything right. And there's almost going to be a need to ask your kids for forgiveness. I mean, this wasn't a question I had, but I mean, how is pursuing forgiveness with a child different than pursuing it with an adult?
I don't know if it is, other than the level of understanding. I
Mm,
would say that it's something societally we're probably not as practiced at, that it's
right.
not such a norm. And I think maybe this has something to do with ways of thinking about children in previous times and in generations. There was a time when we thought about children as like they should be seen and not heard, when we
Right.
treated them with a lot less respect,
Right.
and didn't really honor their dignity and their personhood. And I think that's shifting. And so it's becoming more recognized how important it is to repair and to practice asking for forgiveness to our children. So I don't think it's different. I think kids need it, if not as much, actually more, because the big difference is when a child has been wronged, for lack of a better way to put it, they generally will make sense of that experience by blaming themselves if we don't give them another story and say, actually, mommy messed up. Mommy shouldn't have yelled in that moment, like I was frustrated and I didn't manage my feelings and I let
Wow.
that out on you. And otherwise, they're going to say, I did something wrong. I am bad. Mommy doesn't like, they're going to make up their own story. So we need to actually offer a story that takes ownership of our part, even if it's not the whole thing, but the part where we can take some ownership. And one, we need to be the one to initiate it. But that teaches them how to repair with others, that creates safety in the relationship, that demonstrates to them that you don't have to be perfect because I'm not perfect.
Right.
It just creates so much healing for them and so much skill building in their own relationships that they go forward.
Absolutely. Like, can you imagine a child has recognized how to forgive at such a young age? So now they're able to move forward with that confidence, that security, that to understand that, okay, yeah, they may have done things that maybe were wrong, for lack of a better word, but there was also a second side to it. And even if that person doesn't come and apologize, they can recognize and forgive what's going on. Wow, that's powerful. That's really
Mhm.
setting children up for success. I want to pivot a little bit. You talked a little bit about family of origin and ways that we were taught as kids what parenting looked like. And one of my follow-up questions is, how does a parent's own unhealed stuff, stress, trauma, shame, family of origin, items or issues, how does that get in the way of being present for their
Mhm.
kids?
This is such a good question. And this is so much of the work I do with parents is learning
Mm,
to slow down and identify those moments when
right,
we are starting to disconnect from being able to be present for our kids and to practice ways to calm our nervous system so that we
right,
can re-enter the moment and give our kids what they need. So what happens in those moments? I think there's a program called Circle of Security and it's attachment-based parenting program, something I'm
right.
trained in. And they have this metaphor called shark music. And so I'll paint a picture for you because I think it's so useful. So basically, imagine playing out in front of you is a beach scene, okay? You've got these like rolling, kind of sandy, grassy dunes, nice white sand, crystal clear water, the sun shining down and sparkling on it. And you're looking at the scene, and in the background, you hear da dun, da dun, da dun, da dun, da dun. How do you feel looking at that scene?
Well, I felt really peaceful up until the music came along.
And then what? How did the music influence it?
It definitely got me stressed.
Okay, so stress increases, perhaps a
Hmm.
feeling of apprehension, fear,
Hmm.
foreboding. Okay, now the same scene painted in front of you, rolling grassy dunes, nice white sand, crystal clear water, sun shining down, and this time you hear do 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 do. Now, how do you feel looking at that scene?
I feel very peaceful.
Peaceful, calm, approachable, perhaps, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so the scene playing out in front of us, that beach scene, is life playing out in front of us. It's your children coming to you with their needs, going and exploring their environment, having big feelings, highs and lows.
Yeah.
But what you bring to the situation is your past experience. That's the music that is overlaid on that situation. So
Right.
the situation itself is perfectly safe. Your child
Right.
comes to you feeling angry, feeling sad. There's nothing actually dangerous about that situation.
Right.
But your music, your experience of being parented, your experience of having feelings and how your parents responded to them is then playing over that. And so we
Right.
will respond physiologically with our past experience to what's happening in front of us. So, for example, I can give a personal example. I have very few memories. I can't think of a time when I was a child and I felt angry to tell you about that story, which doesn't tell you that I wasn't angry because everyone feels anger, right? That is a normal human emotion. It is a useful emotion. So I did not feel it. I just haven't logged those memories because I likely avoided that feeling as a child. And I would
Mm.
have learned to do that by reading my parents' cues and recognizing that they were uncomfortable with anger. And so they weren't able to be with my anger. So then I learned that anger is unsafe because it threatens my relationship to my parents.
Right.
Now I know their background, but I'll leave that. That's their story.
Right.
But it makes sense based on our history.
Right.
So now, when my children start to feel angry, I can feel myself shutting down. I can feel my body
Mm.
withdrawing and my mind going somewhere else.
Right.
I used to work with teens, and literally, when a teen was like freaking out at me in a social work context, I'd get this little smile on my face, totally disconnected from the moment. It was the most irritating thing for them because I was so disconnected from where I should be in that
Right.
moment. I should be, like, oh, yeah, this is really frustrating. But instead, I was like removed and just like awkwardly
Uh,
smiling.
how the heck do I get out of
So
here?
that happens with my kids. I notice big feelings of anger showing up, and I can
Right.
feel the withdrawal and the shutdown because it felt unsafe. So I need to remind myself that their feelings are safe and that I
Mm.
can be present with them. And I do that by calming myself, taking a big breath, and going, okay, I can be with them. I don't have to change it, but I can just sit with it. And that is
Mm.
being a safe place for their feelings. And that's going to give them the skills to not shy away from that anger, to be able to sit with it, to be able to make sense of it, work through it, move on from it. But I have to be able to be present with them in that feeling to be able to give them that skill themselves. And that
Right.
takes so much self awareness to know in that moment that's what's happening. It takes so much energy. I can't do that 5 times in an hour. So there are times when the tantrums outdo my ability to stay
Right.
present, which comes back to your question of like, why don't we always? We just don't always have the
We
energy
just don't have
to
the
be
energy.
that self aware and that present and intentional. But when we are, we're able to offer something really special and intentional for our children and
Wow.
break those cycles.
That's incredibly profound, Kathryn. I just want to emphasize I feel a sense of peace even just listening to those stories. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of the stuff you're talking about is there's a certain age where children actually aren't able to regulate their own emotions. And the parent actually has to model. I believe the
Mm,
word is actually mirror, or they model and then it's mirrored back the emotional response. And I mean, if we as parents are not able to be calm because of the music
mhm.
of the scene, it's got us stuck in that sympathetic nervous state of fight or flight. I can appreciate why children would have a hard time also finding that state of calmness and peace.
Absolutely. We co-regulate, right? So just as you say, when they're a baby, we regulate for them. Imagine like a baby cries, you pick them up, you pat them, you rock. You're actually replicating the environment of the womb. You're giving them a safe place. They feel your heartbeat. You're doing that tap rhythmic motion. And that is physiological soothing for them. Also, they have been responded to. Their needs are met. They have that connection, that life source for them. And then as they become toddlers and young children, you do it with them, right? You take the breath with them, you name that emotion, you maybe take like you maybe verbalize kind of what they're going through, like, whoa, this is really hard. You might even say, like, oh, let's have a cuddle here and let's calm down. You
Right.
you do the co-regulate with them, you do it with them. And then as they get older, they've had that experience that I can get activated and get back to calm. And here's how we did it. And then you begin to take a step back and you say, hey, what have you
Wow.
tried so far? So it's a
Wow.
progression. When we just send our kids to their room as punishment for overreacting or for being hyper aroused, essentially, for having big feelings and acting them out, what we're saying is you go deal with them on your own. And
Right.
they just don't have the skills. And so it's really unfair. And what you get then is maybe compliance and
Mm,
dissociation. They're not learning how to regulate. They're learning how to avoid that emotion because it creates separation between them and their
mm.
caregiver. And it's no longer safe.
Wow. Off tangent question from what you just said. Are feelings bad?
No. I use the phrase feelings are our friends. And I think like this isn't new information, like it's Hollywoodized. We've got movies like Inside Out and all of that, right? But
Right.
I encourage kids to, once we begin to identify their feelings, then we want to listen to them. They
Right.
come with a message, they have something to say. Anger says, that was wrong. I've been wronged. This is an injustice. I don't like that. This crossed a
Right.
boundary for me, right? Sadness says this was a loss. So all those
Mm,
feelings need to be heard. And I find that when we teach a child to identify and listen to their feeling, and often we do this through like creating them out of plasticine, drawing them, creating stories around them, puppets with them, like we really interact with them in therapy. But once we're able to do that, then we gain mastery over them and they are not dominating. So it's kind of like a bully, I say. Like the bully's going to be like more and more disruptive until we hear what's really going on underneath the surface, right? There's generally an insecurity or something that's happening. So I say those feelings have a message. We listen to the message, but then we don't get stuck in, oh, your feelings are valid and we're just going to feel them and they're going to be so big and they're going to take over our world. Then we teach them to move to the back of the bus and we get in the
mm.
driver's seat. We say, thank you for your message. I'll take it from here, and we learn how to move through them and move on with our day as well.
Wow. I'm going to pause so you can take a sip of your coffee. This is awesome, Kathryn. We're going to have to do a lot more of these. Yeah. I hear a lot of kids saying that they were bad. I was in a training session, a psychoeducation training, and people were talking about how do I deal with bad emotions? How do I stop having bad emotions? And Braden, our colleague, he was the one that was teaching, and he goes, "What are you talking about? Bad emotions? Like emotions aren't bad. They're an indicator." However, there are situations where maybe emotions rise up and then maybe the behavior that children align with those emotions can be probably destructive is probably a good word to use.
Right.
How do you help parents recognize the emotion and maybe where it crosses a line into destructive or detrimental behavior?
Right. Well, and it's kind of just as you said, we separate the emotion from the behavior. All feelings are welcome, but here are some appropriate expressions of that. Here's how we're going to get that out. So if it's anger, and there's various like levels of expressing anger effectively among like a toddler, it's kind of blind rage. Like when you see a toddler acting out anger, it is like throwing, kicking, throwing toys, hitting people. Like we wouldn't accept that in the adult world, but we don't expect much more from a toddler, right? Like that's all like they don't have any resources, they're just expressing, it's just like kind of primitive mode.
Right.
And then as they get older we expect more and more advanced expression, and so we want to give them useful outlets. We want to be moving them towards those more advanced, but I'm also not going to expect a 2-year-old to say, Mommy, I'm feeling quite angry right now, and I'd like to have a drink of water and a little space to calm down. Like that's not realistic either. So it's
Maybe your
finding,
children.
yeah, it's finding. Although I do love my like 4-year-old now, but she was maybe 2 at the time. I'd be like, "Oh, you're feeling angry." She's like, "No, frustrated," or she'll correct me, which is great feelings awareness. Anyways, we want to give them appropriate outlets, whether that's
Right.
hitting a pillow, drawing out their frustration, using journaling, using like getting towards using words, then getting towards sharing it using appropriate words, which comes after using all sorts of words, and then getting towards saying it, maybe before we act it out. But all of that is
Mm,
quite a progression and it depends on your developmental level. All feelings are useful, and then it's helping people move towards effective expressions of those feelings, why they're showing up and using them for the purpose that they show up for.
right. Makes a lot of sense. Next question I have, and we've kind of spoken to this a little bit, but what's one small thing that a parent could start doing today that could make their child feel more heard or emotionally seen?
Yeah, I think of Dan Siegel. He's a psychologist, psychiatrist, expert in the field, and he's written lots and lots of books. So if you haven't heard of him, look him up, go read anything by him, essentially. And he has this concept of connect, then redirect.
Mm,
So I love it because it's two steps. I don't have to remember a bunch of things. I just need a really simple instruction in the moment, right? One thing we can do. The one thing I would say you can do is connect first. He also talks about how our job as parents and in disciplining is to disciple our kids, which means to teach them, to guide them. And so our job in all sorts of setting limitations and boundaries and growing these children to be contributing members of society is to create these limitations and that are helpful. And so to do that, we need to first connect with them. We don't jump
mm,
straight to the punishment, straight to the correction, but first connect. And that does so many things. It makes them feel safe so that they can hear what you're saying. It
right.
calms their brain so that they can actually take in the learning. It connects it calms that fight flight response. But when you're getting in trouble, when someone uses a sharp tone with you, when an adult who's so much taller than you towers over you, all those things are
Mm,
going to activate the fear response.
right.
So we want our child to be in a calm, receptive state so that
Mm,
they can do the learning we're asking them to do. And so that might look like getting down below their eye level before
right.
we do the teaching. But just
Right.
that simple, like getting your height adjustment so that we're
Right.
not towering over. It might look like you're asking your child to turn off the TV. So you go and sit beside them and connect over what they're watching and just say like, oh, who's that person? Or what's this you're watching? Before you
Right.
go, okay, now it's time to turn it off. Or it
Mm,
might look like they're having a big feeling and you go, this is a really hard, this is a really big one. Just any sort of thing to show like, I'm here, this relationship is safe, and we are bonded before the next step, whatever the direction is that you're giving them.
right.
So I think if you can just remember connect, then redirect, I think it's
Yeah.
such a useful tool in every situation.
Well, I love that because when you think of the word discipline, we really come at that from there's a consequence that needs to be first enforced. Go to your room or whatever. Like even I just saw myself do that. I mean, the intensity in my face as I said that, I can appreciate how that would actually communicate a lack of safety, a lack of connection to the child,
Mhm.
and how we actually have to pursue that connection first so that they can understand that we value them, that they're safe, and then from there, not discipline, that redirect. I love that.
Yeah. Well, in
Um,
like how their brain works, like when they feel afraid, and a child, anyone experiences a threat to a relationship, but especially a child where that parent is like, again, their relationship is a basic human need. When that relationship feels threatened, even in a moment, you have you're activating that fight, flight, freeze response, which
right.
then turns off all the higher order functioning in your brain. It's disconnected. And so they're literally not able to think clearly, to be able
Wow.
to delay gratification, to integrate the learning that you're asking them to do. Like
Wow.
they need to be calm and in a
Right.
receptive state so that they can do what you're asking them to do.
Right.
It's just not
I
possible.
hear people talk about, oh, my son he just saw red, and like there was just no communicating with them, probably because he's in that state of
Yeah.
fight or flight, and it's just wow. You brought up an interesting example that I can really relate to. So I'm 6'3". I'm a bigger guy, and it's amazing how the interaction with a child is different when I will drop down to their eye level or even below their eye level. Like the dynamic has changed so significantly. So yeah, it's an interesting observation. I can move on to our next question. We've definitely talked to this, but just to give some more time to it. How can parents handle big emotion like anger or defiance or sadness in a way that keeps that connection at the center?
Right. Well, again, so often it's the parent doing their own work first. It's learning what their triggers are and being able to calm their nervous system so that then they are not so triggered by their child's feelings
Mm,
and they have the ability to sit with them. I think of a number of mantras. I'm a big fan of mantras because I need something quick and accessible. So things like my child's feelings are safe. That's a useful one. All feelings are safe. This moment is safe. Or my child is not giving me a hard time. They're having a hard time. Which is the focus, right? It's not about me. They're not directing that at me. They're not trying to ruin my day. They're having a hard time. Therefore, my job is that co-regulation, not to kind of react defensively essentially and
right.
put me like they're not putting me on the defensive. I also think about how we have to remember that our child's behaviors are communicating something. That is their form of communication. So we talk about getting down on their level. We also need to meet them where they're at, which is communicating through their behavior. So we can't get too wordy. We're not here to give a lecture. We want to slow down and go, okay, what feelings underneath this behavior? What is that feeling here to communicate? And then speak to that need that's underneath it all. Now, that takes lots of reflection. So it's often not going to happen. In the moment, we do the presence. If we can calm our system, then we just stay present with the child. I mean, I've had many moments where my child is having a big tantrum, and my job is to contain it, to make sure they don't get hurt, and to sit with it. I'm mirroring, as you brought up earlier, that feeling for them with my kind of vocal cues, like, whoa, this is really hard. And that's all I'm doing in the moment. I need to stay so regulated and calm so that they can pick up my calm, but I just want to mirror to them what's going on and contain
Right.
it. And then as we move through it, then I get a chance to go, you were really angry, huh?
Yeah.
What
That
was that
really was a
anger about?
lot.
That was a lot, exactly. Oh, you really wanted that toy and you weren't going to get a chance to use it today. That's so
Mm,
frustrating. That makes sense to me. And then you're storing it for them. You're not leaving that up to them to make sense of, but you really give them a story to kind of like make sense of their experience. And again, this is something that eventually they will take on themselves, but you do it for them, then you do it with them, and then they gain those skills themselves. So, and all of this doesn't mean, again, that we don't set boundaries or have consequences, but it's once that connection is maintained, once they are in a state of calm, once they are able to be in a receptive brain state, then we can do the, okay, well, that was really hard. That anger showed up big. That thing you didn't like. What could we do next time? Let's play that out. Let's practice that out. Let's try something different. And that's when you can do some of those learning pieces.
wow. That's amazing. Okay. So we kind of already talked about this, Kathryn, but I think a lot of parents feel like they constantly mess up or they haven't been that safe place. We talked a little bit about forgiveness, but what can a parent do to repair areas where maybe they've messed up or they haven't been that safe place? What does that look like?
Okay, well, first of all, I would say like repair is just so key. Like it's such an important parenting skill to master because we're just not always going to get it right. And it's so
Mm,
beautiful, as I mentioned before, because it shows our children what humility looks like and what
right.
it's like to be treated with respect. It demonstrates to them that they don't have to be perfect and models to them like how to repair in relationship, which is a skill going forward that is just going to be so key. So what I would say to a parent who feels they've messed up, if it's like, I don't feel like I'm a safe space in general, I would say do some of your own therapeutic work, right? Learn
Right.
those triggers, learn how to calm your system. And it doesn't mean you have to go dig up your whole past, but at least know like which feelings are triggering you, which situations are
Right.
triggering, and what do I do to get to calm? And then you're able to respond more intentionally in a way that upholds your values, where you feel good about the parenting that you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's up to you what those are. So, repair in that case will look like doing things different going forward. For a parent who feels like they're mostly a safe place for their child, but they've messed up in a specific moment, perhaps, I think we start by letting our child know that we see that we messed up, you know? So say like, I'm sorry that I yelled in that moment, an example I've used before. So we take responsibility. One, it opens up space for them to take responsibility. And they're actually so good at it. So often we say, I'm sorry I yelled. So often they'll follow up with, I'm sorry I didn't listen, or whatever it was that triggered the moment. Then we're also storying for our child, when I did this, mommy should have taken care of her own feelings, or whatever it is
Right.
that, let's detach them needing to take care of our feelings. Show them what an apology means, not one with excuses, not one with a big but at the end of it, but
Yes.
here is like, I should not have done it. It's mommy's job to manage her emotions.
Right.
And here's the important part: state what you should have done. Or next time I'm going to take a big breath, maybe pause and go to another room and come back. Or even better, ask for a do-over, right? Like, I would love to
Interesting.
try that again right now. Here's what I would have liked to have said.
Right.
How does that sit with you?
Wow.
Do the redo.
Right. I imagine that is a large part of some of the support you provide with families is that repair, whether maybe a parent responded in a way that was unsafe or there was an extreme blow up and the
Mm.
family's trying to work through that. How does your work with families, especially, through our attachment and some of the art therapy you mentioned, how can that help bring safety and connection back into that parent-child relationship?
Right. Well, I love using art and creative means. One, because it gives us a chance to talk about things that are very uncomfortable, that often activate our stress response system and then a lot of our defense mechanisms, like things like where we avoid or shut down. And so using art kind of separates us from the problem enough that we can talk about it or draw about it or interact with it without being so activated. It creates enough distance. And then we learn so much about it because we can actually look at it and talk about it without all those defenses going up without feeling overwhelmed by it. So then we build on that and we'll develop language around it. We'll, first we'll create, then we'll talk about it. And we'll maybe expand on it in different forms of creativity. And we're coming at it from all these different angles and getting really comfortable with the topic itself so
Mm,
that eventually we can bring that back to our relationships, bring it back to the family system, and
right.
talk about it as a whole more directly. It also, I love art therapy because it has this ability to capture that which isn't always easy to put into words. Capture really contrasting ideas, different feelings, multiplicities in one place.
Right.
And so that usually kind of gives a bit of a sense of relief, like, oh, I don't
Mm,
have to pick if I'm feeling this way or that way, or that, it holds all these things together and we feel a lot more seen, like we can communicate more effectively that way. So I
wow.
love giving children and clients all sorts of ways to kind of reflect on and express and make sense of their experiences. And very often I'll ask parents then to reflect using art as well. Again, because we're meeting the child where they're at. If they express this way, I want the parent to express that way too.
Right.
And and again, it's using these nonverbal skills. It can sometimes express so much more than our words, or our kids can take it in differently. So I love using that as a medium. And then for attachment focused work, again, so often really that's where I do some parent focused work. So if a family's coming to me for an issue that a child is facing, I'll always offer parent focused sessions as a part of their
Mm,
child counseling. And sometimes that can be parent and child if that's appropriate. And sometimes that will be just the parent. So if we want to talk about perhaps where their triggers are coming from, perhaps
right.
what their experience being parented was like, and begin to make sense of how that's now influencing their relationship with their child and how they
Mm,
parent. And again, as their awareness grows, their ability then to be more intentional and less reactive grows as well. And they're able to parent the way that they want to, the way that they value, which is
mm,
something I always really want to honor is like their good intentions
right.
and be able to make more space for those.
Yeah. Yeah. And then and I don't think you mentioned it yet, but and how does sand tray therapy play into that child parent interaction?
I use it similar to art therapy. I'll be honest, I have not got specific sand tray training, but I treat it the sand essentially. So if you come into the office and I pull out a sand tray, it's this big wooden box with a blue base and it's covered in white sand. And one, it just like feels fun to get your
It's
fingers
so tactile. Like
so
you just want to
tactile,
just
so calming because it's like
yeah.
the best part of the beach. It's not like there's no little like critters in there, it's like wet and dirty. It's just like the soft, nice white sand. Anyway, so one that's just enjoyable. But I use that tray of sand like a blank piece of paper, essentially. And then we have a closet or cupboard full of figurines that are animals, different types of like characters that we may know, more general family figures, buildings, trees, vehicles, all sorts of symbols. And I'll invite the client to then just like pull out some things that respond to a prompt. So a prompt might be, show me your family doing something. And then you select different figures that represent your various family members. And you tell me why that reminds you of them or what it is you saw in that figure that were drawn to it for. And then you kind of place them on the sand tray and we look at where you place them and how you move the sand around. You can clear it out and create water and mountains and all sorts of scenes. And I use it just like art therapy. But what's helpful is that the symbols are kind of there to kind of capture your imagination and prompt you on a little bit. You're not starting with such a blank slate, and we can move them around and help them interact and change them as we go. So people love it. I find like kids really excited to engage in it because there's, I mean, just so many fun things to look at, and it's not something you get to do every day, and they're able to express themselves really honestly through it sometimes. So that's been a new one we have available here at Masters that I've been using probably daily, every day I come.
Whenever I tour people around, I always show them the sand trays. I always open it up and I'm always like, I'm just looking for an excuse to play in the sand tray. There's that childlikeness in me that just wants to play in the sand.
Well, and it's not just kids who enjoy it. Like if you give an adult the opportunity, like, would you like to explore it this way? Like so often the answer is yes. I think using metaphor is so helpful because we internalize it differently. We make so much meaning that way. Like
Hmm.
saying it straightforward in words doesn't always sit or resonate with us in the same way that like, oh,
Hmm.
I see that in front of me.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting that I picked that character for that person? It makes sense
Yes.
so many ways now. Like it's something.
we we really do communicate through imagery and metaphors, and I definitely find that, especially there'll be times I'll try and make a comment and I'll mix like three or four metaphors together and I'm like, this makes no sense. I've overcomplicated the metaphor. But on that note, I wanted to bring up the topic of boundaries and the role that boundaries play in emotionals. What can you set limits and still be a safe place?
Absolutely. And you should. I would say boundaries are essential for children feeling safe in relationships. They need to know where the limitations are because unlimited is really actually scary. And then they will not know who's going to take care of them and will feel like they need to
Mm.
now be the adult in charge. And that's an overwhelming role for a child. So, absolutely, limitations are useful and safety provoking.
What
You
could
say
be an example for those of us that maybe aren't as familiar with boundaries in parent-child relationships? What would be an example of a really healthy boundary?
perhaps a curfew, perhaps technological kind of boundaries, like where do we put our phone at night, what websites can we be on, or what social media. For younger kids, it's even just like, these are like, okay, for my own example, my expectation of my young kind of 4-year old is these are things I expect you to do in the morning to get ready before daycare. And the boundary is, like if, or an easier one to explain is like getting ready for bed. Here are the things we need to do. If these are not completed, then we lose time to read stories in the end.
Right,
Now, that's not a threat. That's a natural consequence of things taking too long. It's an important
right,
distinction, and how we go about explaining that to our child and executing it is important. But, we have to like get to bed every night. It's important that your child sleeps a certain number of hours for their health, right? That's a boundary, that's a limitation. And then how do we go about enforcing it? And what are the consequences if we don't get to bed in time in a timely manner? All of that. I think, like, yeah, having a clear routine and bedtime is important for kids. Having clear eating guidelines is important for kids. I mean, routine is so key for children, which comes with all sorts of boundaries and limitations you have to set to maintain a routine, because routine creates feelings of safety for the brain. It knows what to expect. It doesn't have to constantly react to newness. And that allows your child's brain to focus on the things that they should be learning at their
right.
very developmental levels. And so we need to have a clear structure routine to our days to support them doing all the learning that they're meant to be doing.
Right. You gave a great example there where you talked about how you have to have a boundary to go to bed. And if all these things don't get done, you made the clear observation that there's a natural consequence that if we don't get all those done by this time, it shortens reading time. And you made the amazing distinction of it's not a threat, it's just a natural consequence. I think it's very easy though that we accidentally communicate it, or maybe we intentionally communicate it in a way it's like it's a threat,
Yeah.
which my assumption would be is that completely erodes all sense of safety.
Huh.
So my question would be is how can we frame a natural consequence in a way that doesn't come across as a threat?
Right. So one would be like I would veer away from external rewards and punishments, which I think is a behavioral approach to parenting. It's a behavior, there's therapies that are based on behavioral interventions that are like, reward charts and things like that. I would veer away from that personally. So this is a theoretical kind of bent that I would have. And my reason for that is what we want to develop in the long term
Mhm.
is the internal motivation. So
Right.
I want my child learning things like I contribute to my family. I am responsible for taking care of our home. Like, and this is just a value we share. It feels good to to take care of others. What it feels like to be proud of herself. So often my reflection will be like, oh, that was amazing. Do you feel proud? And that's the reward. That's it. I'm not adding any more. Actually, we fall into the habit once in a while because kids are so into creating routine and like predictability. And so we might like be like, oh, you did amazing today. Let's go home. And we have popsicle. And now it's every day I get a popsicle. And you're like, no, 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 that's not a routine. And now we're having to separate for my kids. Like, we give you things because we just love to dote on you, not as a reward, not because you did good in this or that. You might get it anyway, kind of things. We're really trying to separate the behavior from a reward. And we want the rewards to be, did that feel good for you? Did you feel proud of yourself? What was it about contributing to cleaning up after dinner that you enjoyed? Because that's what I want them to take into later in life. The problem with having external rewards and punishments is that you have to keep upping the ante and you lose that internal motivation and that internal awareness of what that felt like for me. I can't remember what the original question was, but that's where my head went.
That is amazing. I'm going to ask an intentionally cynical question.
Yeah.
I don't agree with this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. I hear a lot of people say The problem with this next generation is they've been over coddled and they've been overly spoiled. They have no resilience. Fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Is coming back to the topic of safe space. Now, I think there's probably some very fair or generalizations that we see in society of people that are kids that have grown up. Is creating a safe place going to ultimately put a child into a place where they're spoiled?
I think, yeah, if we misinterpret it, we can go too far in the coddling direction. So I think there is some merit to that statement. Not that we are doing that, but there is a danger of overprotecting and not ever creating opportunities for our children to go through healthy stress and
Mm,
to grow resilience. And so the goal is not to, and that's why I say things like, yes, we want to identify feelings and spend time noticing how they feel in our bodies and know what they're here to tell us. And then we need to know how to move out of them, right? So, yes, we want to teach our children to identify feelings, to know when it feels scary, and to know how to call on their brave self. So, there is for sure, I think, a balance. And I don't think we are serving our children if we don't give them a chance to go out into the world and explore and build those skills.
You remind me of an interesting example I heard recently. A friend of mine, he has a son who's in hockey, and suddenly the son didn't want to play hockey anymore. Guys, the young boy's maybe 7 or 8 years old, loves hockey, but suddenly all of a sudden he doesn't want to do hockey. Dad finally prized it out of him. He was bullied. There was a bunch of kids that were picking on him on the ice. And I think like all of us guys, dad got angry and he wanted to go and deal with it. He wanted to go tell the coach. And somebody gave him the advice. It's like, no, if you're actually to go fight the battle for him, you're stealing your son's opportunity to learn how to advocate for himself. And so what he did was he actually chatted with his son, processed through it, and said, hey, would you feel comfortable going and sharing what happened with the coach? And so the son, with dad supporting him, went to the coach and explained, hey, these guys have been saying X, Y, and Z. Coach was able to facilitate a conversation of something. The kid's excited to play hockey again, but he's now actually able to he's learned an opportunity to advocate for himself. And I was just like, wow, that's an amazing example of really supporting your child, creating that safe place, but then supporting them in really, for lack of a better word, really learning how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing it with them. The first time, he goes alongside him and he still gave him a safe adult to go to. It wasn't like, figure it out. You're going to have to deal with this in the real world. Like,
Rub some
that's
dirt in it.
Yeah, that's too much of a push, right? There
Right.
was a let's do it together first and let's like acknowledge your feelings and validate the heck out of them. Like this is, I mean, bullying specifically is an important one because we don't accept like harassment or like physical attacks again in the adult world or in like a workplace environment. Like that is absolutely not acceptable. So we shouldn't allow it in the world of kids at school or on hockey teams either. Like we do need to intervene. And sometimes that looks like us doing it for, sometimes that's with, sometimes that's getting the appropriate adult, like a coach involved. But we don't want to let that go missed. But absolutely, what an opportunity for building resilience and skills like advocacy.
Absolutely. Last question. We're going to land the plane. Kathryn, if a parent was to walk away from listening to this episode or this interview with just one takeaway, what do you hope that would be?
I mean, I hope it's that you don't feel like you have to be perfect because I
Mm,
think that's overwhelming, but simply like it is your presence that matters. It is your
mm,
unconditional love and acceptance and being that safe place that matters.
wow. That's an amazing end. Kathryn, thank you so much for your time today. If you or your family would benefit from connecting with Kathryn, you can find so much information on Kathryn here at Masters Counseling. You can go to our website, www.masterscounseling.com. Thank you, Kathryn, for your time today. We so appreciate it.
Thanks.